Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, I do like to remind you, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So sometimes in the course of doing these weekly roundup episodes, sometimes there are weeks where you just have to decide when you're going to sit down and just mash that record button. And this week is one of those weeks. Like, it was going fine. Like, everything was kind of okay. Some really good news, some really bad news, but a pretty even news week until about a couple of hours ago, and everything just started going fucking haywire. So at this point, you just have to mash that record button and make your episode. And that's why we all have to use date and timestamps now on our current events podcast, just so you know when we recorded them. So let's go ahead and start kind of a little bit where we left off last week, because it is the most new news cycle going on right now, I guess would be the best way to say it. And that is the government shutdown. Now, it looked like throughout the week that it wasn't going to happen. It seemed like Trump was willing to work with everybody to try to figure out some kind of continuing resolution to keep the government open, because that's what we do now. We don't bother to fucking pass budgets. We just make CRs and we have the same damn discussion every 90 days. But Paul Ryan came out a couple of hours ago and said that the CR that is on the table right now, Trump will not sign it because of its lack of wall funding, which we'll get to the wall in a couple of minutes. But so at this point, maybe government shutdown? Maybe not. Don't know. Whoever fucking knows what the hell Trump's going to do. So that's where we're at on that. And there's going to be a lot of I don't know in this episode, because like I said, everything just kind of started going haywire today. So there's a lot of situations that still getting information in on. But like I said, at some point you just got to sit down, you got to record the episode, and well, if new information comes up, we'll discuss it next week. So that's where we're at with the government shutdown. Looks like it's going to happen. Maybe not. Who the fuck knows? But another story that came out way, way earlier this week, it was probably like the tail end of last week, and that is that a federal judge in Texas ruled that Obamacare was unconstitutional, which everybody cared deeply about for about 15 minutes, and then nobody cared anymore about the story. But basically, a judge ruled it unconstitutional, and it seems like it was on some rather sketchy legal grounds that probably wouldn't hold up if it got kicked up to a higher court. So I look at it as one of these times where a judge decides to do a little bit of judicial activism and make a decision that he knows full and well is not really going to make any kind of serious impact on anybody's life. Like, obviously, Obamacare is not magically gone. Like, it's still here. So, yeah, that was the story, like I said, for about 15 minutes, and then everybody moved on. Another thing that we had this week is the 1-year anniversary of the repeal of net neutrality, which I cannot believe it's been a year already. Like, I was in shock but then I look back at the dates, I'm like, holy shit, it's been a whole fucking year. And we're still here. And you're probably still listening to this podcast on a device that is connected to the internet. And I'm assuming that, much like myself and everybody else, you're not paying some kind of special premium to access this content. It's almost as if everybody who lost their shit over the repeal of net neutrality might have overstated things a little tiny bit when they were losing their shit. Because the whole argument was that without net neutrality, all of a sudden, like, Google was going to be charging you per search, and YouTube was going to be charging you for videos, and Twitter was going to be charging you to tweet, and blah, 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 blah. And obviously, none of that happened, the same way we all said that none of that would happen. And, in fact, internet speeds have actually gotten faster over the past year without an increase in what anybody pays to access the internet. So, Yeah, it's just another one of those where everybody engaged in this insane amount of hyperbole over fucking nothing. And the new excuses that have come out, because of course everybody had their fun this week with it being the year anniversary of the repeal of net neutrality, of making fun of the people who lost their shit. And so now the new excuse is either we never said that it was going to be the end of the internet or anything like that. And it's like, yes, you fucking did. Yes, you did. Don't lie. Some of us remember. And B, the other excuse is, well, it's going to take time for it to all go to shit. It's like, well, it's been a year and literally nothing has changed except that internet speeds have gotten faster. So take the L, net neutrality people. You lost this one. Just suck it up and move on. But it was funny, and I just wanted to note that it has been a year already. Time flies. Time flies so fast now. But now to get into some of the more weighty stories from this week. Trump has made it known, I don't think he's signed it yet, at least not to the best of my knowledge, but he does plan to sign an executive order banning bump stocks. Now, the plan seems to be that once this EO goes into effect, you have 90 days to either destroy your bump stocks or turn them in. First of all, really? Really? Okay. Yeah. People that own bump stocks are just going to destroy them or turn them in for $0. Okay, guy. All right. If you think that's going to happen, I have some lovely, lovely waterfront property in Kansas that I would love to talk to you about. But there is some serious things to talk about here. And the first one is that obviously this is not good. Obviously, bump stocks shouldn't be made illegal. Like, I don't even like bump stocks. Like, they're stupid. It's just, I don't like them. But if you want to have one, you should be able to have one. Like, why? Second of all, this isn't being done through the legislative process as it should be. It's being done through executive order, which is not how you make laws, people. No, this is not how this should work. So that, I mean, and I've talked about executive orders here plenty of times before, but this is just another example of executive branch overreach, doing something that the legislative branch should rightfully be doing if they want to do it. And if they don't want to do it or they're too chicken shit to do it, then it shouldn't be done. Like, the executive branch does not write laws. That's the legislative branch's job. If you want to ban bump stocks, then Congress can get together and make a bill and vote on banning bump stocks, the same way they did with the assault weapons ban and with machine guns. So I still will always have problems with executive orders. Another thing that bothers me about this, and actually Thomas Massey brought it up in a tweet, is that you're asking people who have spent money on an item to either destroy it or turn it over with no compensation. Like, this isn't a buyback program. You're not getting any money back for it if you turn it in. So he specifically cited something, and I should have looked it back up. I'm sorry, but that maybe this isn't entirely a legal thing to be asking people to do. That, especially like in other places where they've done things like this, where they've made either guns illegal or certain guns illegal, stuff like that, there have been buyback programs, like famously in Australia, and they do it in cities like Chicago and New York and stuff like that. They have buyback programs. So if you want to turn in your weapon, you are getting like money back for it. It's not like you're just out that investment. So I'm wondering exactly how that's going to play out legally. And the last thing that I thought was rather interesting / disturbing about this, especially in relationship to like back when we had the assault weapons ban, which wasn't really an assault weapons ban. It was a ban on specific sorts of magazines, honestly. And then when they banned machine guns, was that all of the existing items that were now banned going forward, that the ones that existed and that people already had were grandfathered in. So, like, you can technically today buy a machine gun. You can buy a fully automatic if you have a lot of fucking money. I mean, you can get them on the used market. I mean, I've seen them on like Gunbroker and stuff like that. But I mean, we're talking like 5 figures, 6 figures sometimes. Like it's nuts, but you can get them because it wasn't something where you were expected to like turn in what you already had or anything like that. And also while the assault weapons ban was in place, like you could still get those old magazines because again, anybody who had them pre-ban, it was grandfathered in and it wasn't illegal for you to sell them. It was just illegal for anybody to go to the store and like purchase brand new ones. So this idea that bump stocks aren't going to be grandfathered in is a little disconcerting. Like that's not traditionally how we've handled any kind of gun restrictions in the US. So I'll be interested to see kind of how this ends up panning out. I mean, I don't expect anybody who has a bump stock to just hand it over or destroy it because it's not like if you have a bump stock, you are probably pretty deep into gun culture. I mean, it's not something that you just have around your house for like personal defense or something like that. Like you're either like an avid hobbyist or you're somebody who's like really hardcore into this. And the idea is going to be amongst these people. I know my gun nut crowd. They're basically going to go like full Gadsden, come and take it from me. So like this is just not going to work out the way anybody thinks it's going to. And I don't know effectively what it's going to change. Like, I get that this is in response to the Vegas massacre. Okay. As horrific as that is, that's one incident that happened with a bump stock. So now everybody everywhere who has a bump stock has to get rid of him? Like, what the fuck sense does that make? Like, there's been many more people killed with kitchen knives. Do we all have to get rid of all of our kitchen knives now? Like, it makes no fucking sense. And I'm really wondering if, actually, it's probably not even if, it's going to be a when somebody takes this to court, if it's going to actually hold up in a court of law. So, we shall see. But, moving on to much, 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 much happier news. And that is that the First Step Act, the Criminal Justice Reform Act that I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, did actually come to a vote, and it has been voted and approved by both the House and the Senate. So it will be going to Donald Trump's desk, where he has already indicated that he will sign it into law. So thank God for that. At least there are some Christmas presents to be had this week as far as the news is concerned. And I'm especially happy about this because where we left off on it last time I was discussing it, Mitch McConnell was kind of up in the air about whether this was even going to be allowed to come to a vote. He was talking about how there might not be enough time, we don't have votes, blah, 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 blah. But I am happy to report that it did ultimately come to a vote, and it has been voted affirmative, so that will be the law going forward. And yes, like I said before, it's not the bestest criminal justice reform bill that has ever been thought of or conceived ever. But, I mean, it's right there in the title. It's the First Step Act. So, I'll take it. Like, I'm very happy that this is actually going to become law. Like, I can't believe we actually got criminal justice reform done. Like, this was not what I was expecting out of a Trump presidency. And I'm hoping that this will be indeed a first step and that it is something that we can all build on to start addressing other issues and more of the same issues that are in the bill. So, hooray for that. Happy Christmas, libertarians, for getting some criminal justice reform. The other bit of very, very, very happy news from this week is that Donald Trump tweeted out that he intends to pull all of the troops out of Syria. Which, glory, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. Oh my God. This and criminal justice reform were not the things I was expecting this week, but especially Trump saying that he intends to pull all the troops out of Syria, which, to be fair to Trump, he did campaign on that, and he has been very vocal about wanting to do that ever since he took the presidency. And like I said, during his campaign, he was very vocal about getting troops out of the Middle East in general. Like, I'm sure he would really like to do Afghanistan. We'll see how that turns out. But the time frame that has been laid out is also very, very aggressive. Basically, all State Department personnel that are in Syria are to come home immediately. Like, pack up your shit, come on home. Complete troop withdrawal is meant to happen within the next 60 to 100 days, which obviously that is a very, very short time frame. So, I mean, there's discussion as to whether this is actually going to happen or not, because it's come out over, I think we started this yesterday, going through today, that once again, Trump announced something, and the Pentagon had no fucking idea that this was coming. Much like he did when he announced that troops were going to be going down to the border, and the Pentagon was like, what the fuck? We didn't authorize any of this. That's where we seem to be with the Syrian drawdown. But here's my thoughts on that. And I'm beginning to wonder if maybe sometimes Trump might be a tiny, tiny bit smart. It seems to me, and especially looking at this situation and looking back at that border situation, if he doesn't realize that as commander-in-chief, because he is commander-in-chief, obviously, that if he says something related to the military and as far as stationing troops places, drawing troops down, he understands maybe that by doing that, he can force a certain issue. Like, if Trump says something about the military, the Pentagon has to respond. Like, he's the commander-in-chief. If the commander-in-chief is tweeting out that we are pulling all the troops out of Syria, the Pentagon can't just kind of like whistle and just keep it moving. Like, you have to come up with some kind of response. So they are at this point, and it seems like they are going along with that. Like, it seems, from what I've seen, they are trying to draft plans to do a troop drawdown out of Syria. So fingers crossed that it happens, because of course, as usual, the Pentagon can always kind of tell Trump, basically, like they did for a minute on the whole sending troops to the border thing, to go fuck yourself. Although they did eventually send troops down to the border. But I mean, it's interesting to think that maybe Trump, maybe sometimes he has an idea up there. Like, maybe there's at least two brain cells rubbing together up there sometimes. And I don't normally agree with anything that the man does, but if he can get the troops out of Syria, oh my God, that's huge. That is a big fucking deal. That's something that a lot of us have been agitating for years. And to that point, because this is something that has really pissed off pretty much every libertarian that I know and I follow online and that I am friends with, and that has been the response from the media on this particular topic. Now, obviously, the issues in Syria and in Yemen have been a big, big bugaboo for libertarians, especially those of us who focus a lot on foreign policy and on being anti-war. The responses from the media and people, specific people in the media, have been less than enthusiastic, shall we say? And I mean, and of course, like the Fox News crowd, you're not, I don't really know where they stand with this, because I really try not to watch network news. Like, it's just, no, I get my news from Twitter. Okay, that's where you get your news from, people. Don't watch network news. You will just want to break your television. Anyway, there's I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this without completely losing my shit, which I will probably still do anyway. But the response to this has been, there's been a lot of people slamming this decision as reckless, as impulsive, as Trump is being controlled by Putin. Like, this is going to help Russia. This is going to help Iran. This is going to help all the wrong people. We're going to leave some kind of power vacuum. This is just an awful, awful, awful thing to do. And it's like, you know what? All y'all can go fuck yourselves. Seriously, like, stop it. We had no business being there in the first place. Yes, we need to be out of Syria. Like, this is not a question. And no, we're not going to do this little game where, oh, we'll pull out of Syria when things stabilize. Guess what? It's the Middle fucking East. That shit ain't been stable ever. When has the Middle East ever been fucking stable? Like, give me a year, peg it to something. That's never going to fucking happen. So, you can take off with that nonsense. The second thing is this idea that, oh, we should leave troops there until we can have a congressional vote, which I see what the fuck you're doing. I see you, Lindsey Graham. You're never going to bring that vote to the floor. That's never going to happen. So, again, you're wanting to leave troops in Syria indefinitely based on criteria that is never going to fucking happen. And then there's the criticism from people on the left who want to criticize this strictly because Trump's doing it. Like, that's the only fucking reason. Like, if Obama did this, it would be sunshine and lollipops and just rainbows as far as the eye can see. But because it's Trump doing it, all of a sudden it's a fucking problem. And I tweeted this out, and I'll go ahead and say it on the podcast too, even though I'm sure probably all of you follow me on Twitter. But this just proves that the anti-war left never really fucking existed. Like, obviously, it went bye-bye during the Obama years. I was kind of expecting it to come back during the Trump years. It hasn't. But it seems to me now that the anti-war left that existed under W's term existed now not specifically to actually be anti-war, but to oppose W. Because where the fuck did they go? Where y'all at? Where is the applause here? Where are all of the lefties who bitch, whined, moaned, and complained under W about sending troops off to war? Where did you go? Why haven't you come back? And why aren't you happy right now? Why? What? Like, that's been one of the most disappointing things to me about the Trump presidency, honestly, because going into it, I thought, okay, like, this is going to suck. Like, Hillary would have sucked, Trump's going to suck, pretty much anybody would have sucked. But I thought at least maybe when Obama was gone, we can have, like, the anti-war left come back. Like, there can actually be a true anti-war movement again. And there hasn't been. It's been fucking crickets. And this whole Syrian thing has really, really brought home just how bullshit it was under W. Like y'all didn't really care. They didn't care. All you cared about was opposing W. You didn't really give a shit about being anti-war or trying to bring troops home from places where they never should have fucking been in the first place. Yeah. And it's not just me who's noticed this. Like, there's been a few people on Twitter who have taken note of this fact and have pointed it out. So I feel pretty good in pointing it out too. So anyway, moving on, because I can sit here and talk about that all day and just get more and more irritated. So let's move on to the wall. Or, as maybe we should start calling it, the Slats. This story this kind of cracks me up, because this coupled with the shutdown, coupled with what I'm going to talk about after this, it's like, what the fuck is going on? Anyway, Trump had tweeted out a couple days ago that the wall, you guys remember the big beautiful wall It was going to be big and beautiful and a wall. Well, apparently now it's going to be metal slats, I guess. It really looks and sounds more like a modern art installation to me than anything that would actually keep people in or out of the country, which, don't get me wrong, like, I have been very, very anti-wall, and I still am. I do not like the idea of there being a physical barrier between us and Mexico or any other country, because that just brings up really, really squicky images of times in the past where walls have separated people, and it's been particularly fucking ugly. But there's been this walk back on what the wall, or the slats, I suppose, are going to be. And, of course, this has pissed off all the right people, as far as I'm concerned. Ann Coulter is so pissed right now. And she tweeted out something about this being like a clown government or something like that, and Trump unfollowed her. Which is just, that's the most 2018 thing ever. Like, I unfollowed you because you made fun of my government, and I don't like you anymore, so I'm going to unfollow you. Don't you make fun of my big, beautiful slats. They're going to be beautiful. I'm telling you, I promise you. But sometimes when I do try to do the Trump voice, it goes European for some reason. I don't know what that is. But, so, obviously, the whole MAGA crowd, like, Laura Ingram's pissed about it, Ann Coulter's pissed about it. Everybody who was just pinning their hopes on the big, beautiful wall are now just big and beautifully pissed off. So, that's kind of a little Christmas present, too. Like, finally, the acknowledgement that the wall is not going to happen. Which I've been saying. I told y'all. I've been telling y'all. The wall ain't gonna fucking happen. There's not gonna be a wall. I told you. I was right. Give me some credit here. But, not to be outdone, the market has decided to try to address the issue. Somebody started a GoFundMe. Okay. A fucking GoFundMe to build the wall. And not the slats, but the big, beautiful wall. And it has raised, at the time of this recording, $4 million. Now, obviously, $4 million is not even, like, that will get you, like, maybe, I don't know, 1,600 bricks. I mean, government projects, you know how those go. But just the idea that somebody started a GoFundMe for this, and, like, okay, everybody can do whatever the fuck they want to do with their money. It's your business. But before you donate to a GoFundMe, maybe research whether that's actually something that is feasible. Because, I mean, you could give money to the government. Like, you can give them a lump sum, and they will gladly take it. But you have no control over what they spend it on. Which, I mean, if we had control over what the government spent our money on, holy shit, would things look a hell of a lot different right now. But just the whole idea that somebody did this is hilarious. And this is going to end up, I'm telling you, this is going to end up worse than that couple who started that GoFundMe with the homeless dude, and they raised like $400,000, and it was all a big fucking scam. Like, this money is going to end up disappeared somewhere. Watch. Trust and believe. Like, somebody is going to, like, take the fuck off with $4 million, and it's going to be hilarious in a way. Like, I don't want anybody to get, like, swindled, but if you donate to this, I mean, you're kinda asking for it. So, that's where we're at with the wall as of this week. But in other U.S.-Mexico immigration news, and I know I keep talking about this on the podcast, and I do it because, honestly, I don't feel like this situation is getting near enough press. It is not being talked about nearly enough anywhere else. So I'm going to keep bothering you guys with it in the hopes that at least those of you who listen to me kind of get to stay a little more abreast of what's going on as far as immigration, asylum, stuff like that, than you would normally be. And also, this is kind of becoming my own personal hobby horse. Anyway, another reason why the news cycle went completely fucking haywire earlier today is that it seems like the Remain in Mexico plan. And I talked about this probably roughly a month ago when it was first floated that the plan is, or at least was back then, seems to be the plan right now, is that asylum seekers would stay in Mexico while they are awaiting their asylum hearings, which obviously presents a lot of logistical issues, a lot of other issues. I discussed it. I'll try to go back and figure out which episode it was and link it in the show notes, because I did a little more of a discussion on it back then. But it seems to be like US and Mexico have agreed, maybe. Again, this is another one of those that's, I don't know. But it seems to be that they have agreed, that the US and Mexico have agreed that this will be the plan going forward. That asylum seekers will be housed in Mexico while they wait for their asylum hearing, which can be anywhere from months to years. I mean, it's not like when you apply for asylum, it's like you get a date, like a court date, like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Like, no, there is a huge backlog, like, no doubt. So again, this is one of those where the whole situation is, to me right now, very up in the air and sketchy, because it seemed like, was this announced unilaterally through the US? Was Mexico actually on board with it? It seems like Mexico is, but they don't exactly want to cop to it. And it's very up in the air right now. It's very confusing as to who has agreed to what and who knew what when, and whether this was news to Mexico or whether it was a deal that was actually already hammered out. I don't know. It's very weird. It's the reporting coming out on this, and of course, because again, it's not getting a lot of news coverage. There's not a lot of sources who are reporting on this, and the sources that I'm seeing things from, like, obviously, again, if you're not following Dara Lind and you care at all about immigration policy, go follow her on Twitter. And there's a couple other people too, but it seems to be very confused. Like, and of course the things that are coming out of Mexico seems to be very jumbled. Like, there was a press conference today, but this was announced after the press conference. Like, it's very, I don't know. So hopefully in the next couple of days, and maybe by the time I do next week's roundup, it will be a little more concrete as to what the fuck is actually going on. But I had brought up, back when I discussed it about a month ago, the idea of why would Mexico even remotely consider doing this? Like, why would they take on our responsibilities as far as housing asylum seekers while they wait for their court dates? Well, I tweeted it out earlier today, and somebody actually tweeted me back an answer. And this is per AP News, and this is from the 18th of this month. The United States pledged $5.8 billion in aid and investment Tuesday for strengthening government and economic development in Central America, and another $4.8 billion in development aid for southern Mexico. The U.S. aid aims to promote better security conditions and job opportunities as part of a regional plan to allow Central Americans and Mexicans to remain in their countries and not have to emigrate. Now, this was interesting to me because when this was first floated a month ago, it was made semi-clear that there would be no financial compensation from the U.S. to Mexico to do this. And it seems like there will be $4.8 billion in financial compensation to Mexico for doing this, which that actually makes this all make a hell of a lot more sense now. I mean, if you're paying them to house these people, I mean, and of course, development aid. Like, you're basically paying off Mexico to do our dirty work for us. And I mean, you're doing almost $5 billion to Mexico directly. You're almost at $10 billion overall. Okay, this is starting to make a little more sense to me. So, yeah, it seems like that's happening. I'm not, like I said, I'm not entirely sure, but from what I've been able to gather, and this information is preliminary, it's that this idea of housing people in Mexico will apply to almost everybody, including people who hop the border. Now, like I've said many times before, I'll just say it again briefly. It used to be that you could hop the border, present yourself to Border Patrol, and start your asylum process that way. It's maybe you could still do it that way because the asylum ban is currently not in place. Like, it's been held up in the courts, and the courts have said that no, you can't do it that way. What's interesting about this, though, is they seem to think that if somebody makes it to the U.S. and applies for asylum, they can be pushed back to Mexico, which that would be illegal. Like, you can't do that. Like, you can't, if somebody presents in your country for asylum, you can't shove them off to another country. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work. And it also seems to be that unaccompanied minors will be exempt from this rule of staying in Mexico. And to clarify, just because we're here and we're discussing about this, but again, I'll try to link it in the show notes where I discuss this further. The idea is that, okay, you're a migrant, you're part of a caravan, you come up through Mexico, you come to a port of entry, you present yourself. In order now, under the Remain in Mexico plan, you would have to demonstrate a credible fear of staying in Mexico in order to be allowed into the United States. Like, it can't just be a reasonable fear. Like, you have to have something concrete. Otherwise, you're going to be expected to stay in Mexico. So, I don't know. It seems that there have already been, like, there's been murmurs about somebody taking this to the Ninth Circuit and challenging it, and whether it would actually hold up under a Ninth Circuit challenge, I don't know. Again, this is very, very breaking news, so this is all kind of remains to be seen kind of stuff, but that is what's going on. And again, I think it kind of sucks that nobody really talks about what's going on with immigration policy, because there is a lot of sketchy shit going on, and a lot of potentially illegal things, and a lot of things trying to be done through EO that shouldn't be. So, anyway, evolving story. Probably talk about it again next week if there are any new revelations to talk about. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And I would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Kwanzaa and Boxing Day or whatever it is you celebrate. Because, again, going into next week, I don't entirely know when I'm going to be able to record. So I still want to do 2. I have 2 planned. We'll see how that works out. But obviously next week is going to be just a mess for everybody else too. So we're all in this together. We'll figure it out. But as always, if you did make it this far, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.